Hello everyone, and today we're going to be talking about the Old World, more specifically Kislev, a faction which was confirmed for the Old World and has yet to show itself. The thing is, I think it's only a matter of time, and to be honest, I'm starting to think it might be sooner rather than later, especially as Cathay has had two full waves with a semi-complete roster. They don't have everything available to them from, like, say, Total War Warhammer, but to be fair, there will be more waves and likely more arcane journals. And I want to use that mentality to kind of see if I can guess what will be the first wave, purely for fun, but I've been thinking a lot about Kislev recently as I found a bunch of my old metal minis, and after I record this video, I'm going to go and buy some Dettol so I can strip them down and repaint them, because I mean, they're cool, and I'd like to have them up on display, because it'll be kind of fun. So before we jump into the speculation, we have to look at the original Grand Army list for Grand Cathay. There were 3 character options, the Shugengan, the Lord Magistrate, and the Gatemasters. Remember that those were also Gatekeepers. You also had, like, the basic strategist and the standard Shugengan, meaning that you had 3 generic characters and 1 named character. For core, you had the Jade Warriors, which had 2 different weapon options, and the Jade Lancers. The Jade Warriors themselves could be upgraded, so could the Jade Lancers, I think, to be Celestial Dragon Guard, and we're going to be talking about kind of something similar there too. There were 2 war machines, so the Fire Rain Rocket and the Grand Cannon, and then finally 2 big entities, the Sky Lantern and the Sentinels, meaning that there was a fair amount for its first wave. I think a lot of people didn't see it as much because most people just relied on the Sentinels until they got nerfed, and for good reason. It was horrendously overpowered. This list also included 1 named character, which is obviously Miao Yin, but she came in much later down the line, and I imagine that they'll probably do the same thing once again, because they can easily just build up the hype with that. So how could this be translated to Kislev? Thankfully, we do know about the possible Kislev units, thanks to Total War Warhammer, as we do know that Creative Assembly and Games Workshop worked as a collaboration effort for a lot of this type of stuff. I could see a lot of these units being available from the very beginning. Now, whether or not they use units that haven't been released for Total War Warhammer just yet could be entirely possible. However, it seems that Creative Assembly did struggle to create some units for Shadows of Change, including the drama that was surrounding it, so maybe Kislev for now is done. That doesn't mean that Games Workshop isn't making their own stuff, but I imagine that they'll want to use units that would be the perfect cross-promotion with Total War Warhammer. That type of synergy does tend to happen nowadays, it seems. At least when it happened with Grand Cathay. So let's start off with generic characters. I could see Boyars and Atamans being introduced as lords and heroes respectively. Atamans are basically a lord choice in Total War Warhammer, but that doesn't matter when it comes to the tabletop, as Gatemasters are lords essentially in the tabletop, but actually heroes in the video game. It's a weird thing. So there are obviously going to be minor changes, but I could see that coming out as a 2-part kit. So 1 on foot and 1 on a warbear, as a warbear would be a centerpiece and it would easily sell. This is kind of different to that of Grand Cathay, and I think it's because it makes a lot more sense to have the bear still having the option to have, for example, a BSB, more similar to that of the other kits for the other factions, like for example the dwarfs. You've got the shield bearer kit, or then you've got the standard 1 on foot, or all the other captain kits, which is 1 mounted on a mount, 1 on foot, and then a BSB between them. You can decide where it goes. I could see them introducing the Patriarch also, again with 2 different types. Now the big question here is, would they bring in a bear mount or go with a basic horse mount? The thing is, there would be more mounts already from the very beginning, because the Shugengan came in with the special Longma, the Gatemasters had the horse, and the strategist and the magistrate had a mount option. It was the Sky Lantern. So you have to think of it that way. So I do expect more characters with mount options here, just to kind of pad it out, because I don't think we're going to be getting all the really big Kislev stuff like the Frostworm just yet. The big question afterwards is what happens. With the Patriarch coming in, you get a Warrior Priest, but there's no magic. So do they start implementing the Ice Witches, which would be kind of cool? The Frost Maidens and the Ice Witches do have a lot of options. Or do they introduce like the Druzina to have a ranged unit? I feel like maybe the Druzina would be the better option, and then have like a hero version too, especially since the Patriarch would bring in a magic aspect. I'm going to leave that one pretty open-ended. It's definitely one or the other. If they're going to go with the same format as they did with Grand Cathay, I don't know. It's one of those weird options. There'd obviously be a named character, and we don't know who that could be. I mean, they went with one for Grand Cafe. It's a bit of a shame. I would have preferred two. I feel like more named character options, you can theme around a lot more. But if they're going to be going with the same theme Grand Cafe, they might just be one and then maybe introduce more in future Arcane Journals. Maybe the Tsarina, but I still think it's too soon. So it's really open-ended here. It's not like the Grand Cafe stuff where, you know, these characters are basically immortal. Okay, now looking at units, I could expect the same format. So going with Armored Corsairs, which would be a hybrid unit, so these guys have shield and hand weapons, or a great weapon, but also have pistols. You get two variants, which could then also be upgraded to Zargard if they do like a Tsar or any other type of like named character. The thing here, if it goes with the same format, is I don't like what they did with Grand Cafe. There's supposed to be a visual distinction between, say, for example, the Jade Lancers and the Jade Warriors, right? With the Celestial Dragon Guard. And unfortunately, that's not there. It's supposed to be different shields. It's supposed to be different helmets. That wasn't included in the kit. I feel like that's pretty annoying just with, oh yeah, just get these and paint them up gold. It doesn't really fit too well, which is why I haven't made any Celestial Dragon Guard myself. Mind you, I'm not really fielding Meow Yin that much anyway. I should, because she's fun, but it just kind of puts me off a bit. And it would put me off a bit for Kislev once again. But going with the same format, I could see that happening for core, winged lancers, at least for the time being, then being moved off, right? Or, you know, having the same thing where you could have like 2 units in a 2,000 point game as core, but the rest would be special. And then you could upgrade them to be Griffin Legion, which, again, would have to have a visual distinction, but maybe not until future releases. I could see that happening. You can have some footmen, some horsemen, upgrade them. You do a decent amount of damage with that, right? So I think it's already looking pretty much on the ball, but we have to start looking towards other units. So here, we'd have to look at special and rare, where there would be war machines and some like big centerpieces, I think, right? The problem with Kislev is that they don't really have that much, especially like when you look towards war machines, unless there's some other stuff. What they could end up doing is diversifying there a little bit. I know some people would expect Warbear riders and stuff, but we're still missing Longmar riders. So I think they might go a little bit down to a different format. If they go with Ice Witches, I can expect the introduction of Ice Guard, because there's 2 different types. Swords and bows, and obviously glaives and bows, right? Hybrid units, but it kind of makes sense considering that that's what the design ethos for Kislev has mostly been. The reason why I'm saying that is because there has been Ice Guard art shown by Games Workshop in the past when they actually announced that Kislev was going to be a faction in the old world. So this makes a lot of sense, just to go like, here's a proper range unit from a long distance, you know, maybe hitting... I'd give them warbows, but they'd probably give them higher, so 30-inch range. Because, oh yeah, magical arrows or whatever. I'd prefer stealthy or Kshina ambushes, to be honest, but I feel like they're just going to lean towards that. Now that I'm thinking about it more, yeah, I could see the Ice Witches instead of the Druzina, and just going, here's the Ice Guard to attach to it, right? Just makes a lot of sense. Introduce some artillery with Little Grom, which, I don't know, maybe would change up without the bears. Because, like, you know, the war machines in Grand Cafe are supposed to be pulled by oxen, but they aren't there. They're just kind of stationary. So I could see this just being a big cannon, big damage, very, very big damage, more on the line of, say, for example, a Hell Cannon, but being completely stationary. You're supposed to expect changes coming in here to be like that, right? Not everything is the same from like Grand Cafe on Total War to the Tabletop and vice versa, so the same thing could be here. And it's the same thing with like just like normal core factions and legacy factions. Certain things do not perform the same way because gameplay restrictions or demands. Bring in the Elemental Bear as a huge centerpiece. They like doing big centerpieces. Cathay had 2, obviously, the Lantern and the Sentinel, but I don't think that they could do that much. It does mean that they'd have less, but I don't think that's a problem considering that the range aspect would be covered early on. Then finally, what they could do is the introduction of the War Sleds, both light and heavy. Same kit, kind of similar to what happens with the High Elf kit, right? So you've got the High Elf chariots could either be the normal chariots or the White Lion chariot. Here, there would be a bit of a difference, though. So it's obviously still pulled by bears, no horses. So the difference here would just literally be changing up the equipment used and putting more armor on the bears, which is not out of the question. Extra bits works, like if they're trying to do a big kit. The big question is, would it have one chariot or maybe two? Like realistically, if they could have two chariots in a box, that would be great. I think that's literally what could be the battalion, right? Just going in with 3 units of armored corsairs in groups of 10, so you get 30 in a box. A unit of 10 knights, so 2 units of 5, just to have the lancers there, and then a chariot or 2. That looks like a battalion box to me. Sure, the war sleds wouldn't be artillery based, but like we've seen these types of battalions before. Like, for example, Chaos, which has chariots. High Elves also. It's not out of the question, and I think it could actually end up being quite good. So I think this is pretty fair for a first wave. Sure, it's not massive, but it's pretty much in line with Cathay, I think. Sure, there's going to be discrepancies, but this is what happens when you have different types of like races and stuff. Now, I could be completely wrong here, and they could just go completely different opposite sides of the spectrum. Bring in the snow leopard, maybe even bring in the horse archers, some basic corsairs. But I feel like they're going to want to go with heavy as like, oh yeah, you know, this is the first part of the Grand Army, and then later go with a more tribal aspect. Bring in, I don't know, corsairs, Akshina, maybe even just like some horse archers, the dervishes. It's still too early to tell, right? I think the mentality for Kislev will be like, oh yeah, you know, just like Grand Cathay, they're dealing with some very heavy chaos stuff, so you're going to need some very heavy units with expansions to come afterwards. Hopefully, though, if that's the case, they don't follow the same route as Grand Cathay. The Second Arcane Journal wasn't really good, and it was the whole mentality of like mixing Cathay with the Empire. I don't want that for Kislev. I feel like, you know, they have enough legs to stand on by themselves. They should just do a straight into second wave after a certain period rather than bringing in a hybrid faction. Maybe that's just me, but I didn't like the second journal system. I liked Miao Yin. She was really, really cool. I enjoyed painting her up and stuff, but it felt weird compared to like then the next wave, which came in with the peasants, the gunners, and the rest. We don't know when Kislev is coming, but I imagine it's something that they are going to want to look into because they're going to want to generate a lot of sales, and Kislev is big memes. Big memes equals sales. You can just do the whole Kislev stuff over and over, you know? And if they are in this whole mentality of doing a 3-year cycle for the old world like everyone else, we're getting close to the next cycle. They're going to have to start looking towards another race. Because while model updates are quite cool, you know, like the Tomb Kings ones were amazing, it's hard for a lot of people to justify buying a bunch of redos if they've already got like big armies. So new armies are the big way to hit it. I'm not an expert with this. I don't know what their sales are like, but yeah, you know, I want to get those new Tomb Kings. I just don't see the need right now because I already have a BSB. I already have a bunch of princes and lords. But let me know what you guys think about my predictions in the comments below. Let's start a bit of discussion. Hopefully it's not too long until we get to see Kislev. Really, I'm just like, it's my anticipated thing. Cathay was stunning and I adore them. That's why I'm still painting loads of them. But Kislev, I think a lot of people have been wanting. Have a good day, guys. Bye.